Welcome back to Wine and Dime. Oh, yeah. I haven't tried it yet, actually.
We're back.
Yeah, so today we got some Oregon Pinot Noir.
I'm enjoying it so far, man. I gotta say.
It's a really light Pinot. Like, really, really light. Super, like, light color, too. It's like you can see pretty much right through that. And it's, like, nice and fresh and fruity. I feel like my palate's a little messed up still from this cold, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, we're for those of you at home, we're drinking the Erath Oregon Pinot Noir. So I was reading about it, and it's not a pure Willamette Pinot Noir. It is from a mix of the Willamette and Umpqua valleys and the Dundee Hills appellation. So we got three different appellations, but it's volcanic based, so definitely gives it some nice distinctive profile, which is pretty common in Oregon. I've noticed definitely there's a lot more like minerality in a lot of the wines that come from there, just from the soil, which is interesting, kind of makes it unique. So yeah, I don't mind it. It's nice and light so far. Good for a Saturday afternoon recording.
I don't know if it's that I haven't had a Pinot in a while, but I'm getting like more like fruit than I thought I was gonna get from it.
Yep. Pinots are very like fruit forward. I mean, the Willamette Pinot I've been drinking a lot lately, and if anyone watched our reel about Willamette, the Zoolander Willamette Pinot Noir, it's definitely a lot more like tannic than this one, just because of the style it's produced in, and also just the soil itself has a lot of like iron in it, so it gives it that kind of like tannic vibe, even if it's not even super like strong tannin. So this one's very like light and fruity comparatively. It definitely gives me more like California Pinot vibe. Less sweet though than a California Pinot, but gives me that kind of like light fresh fruitiness that I've come to expect from California Pinot Noir. So this is actually this
Yeah, for
one.
a second, I thought I accidentally bought a Chianti or something. I was like, oh, this is not what I expected it to taste like.
Yeah, it's definitely like pretty like short finish too. I don't find it like lingers very much. Yeah, I can taste a little bit of the minerality for sure. I also just ate something that could have probably impacted that, but whatever. It's pretty tasty. I don't mind it. So I guess the reason we're here today with the Oregon Pinot Noir is Portland's coming to the WNBA.
And on their way, and it's just like it's just long overdue. You know what I mean? Portland's been huge in women's professional sports. The Portland Thorns and NWSL are massively popular. So it felt natural that a WNBA team should be coming to Portland. And, you know, there's not a lot of competition either in the city other than Thorns and the Blazers. So that team could really take off.
Well, and they were one of the OG franchises back in the day anyways with the Portland Fire. So kind of nice to see the W going back to a city that historically had a team that did pretty well, I think. I don't actually know that much about the Fire, but...
They were around for like 3 seasons or something like that. It was pretty short-lived.
Yeah, I think that Portland is definitely a better sports city now than it was back then. I think it can handle the infrastructure of women's sports better, especially since, like you said, like with the Thorns already. And then, I mean, like the sports bra, that first women's sports bar to ever open, it is in Portland. And I think Alexis Ohanian, Serena Williams' husband, I think he is backing them to become a franchise. So they'll expand across the country, which would be kind of cool. So yeah, the WNBA expansion was announced. So Portland will start in 2026 when Toronto enters, I think. So next year we'll have 2025 will be San Francisco, and then a lot of sirens in the background here. For some reason. So 2025 we'll get San Francisco, we'll get the Valkyries, and then 2026 we'll get Toronto and Portland, which is pretty exciting. So I'm really happy that Portland...
Yeah, the symmetry of an East and a West joining at the same time, too, which is always nice.
Yeah, because there's definitely... I guess, are there more teams in the West?
And there will be now. There
will be with...
San Francisco's going to throw the numbers off, yeah. But, the original Portland Fire team lasted from 2000 to 2002. So I think this team's going to be much better set up for success. There were some financial issues that caused them to fold, unfortunately. And I think they're in a good situation now. I think they'll have no problem converting fans over. I think it's it's a better basketball city than it was before. I mean, not that the Blazers didn't have a good fan base from a long time ago, but you see the way they used to talk about the team back in the so-called Jail Blazers era and stuff like that. It kind of felt like a city fighting against its own franchise, and a little bit of like the weird racial shit that surrounded that. I think from the outside, at least, it seems like Portland has been a little bit better of a basketball market lately in that sense. So hopefully,
still a shockingly racist place though. Yeah. Oregon's not great in that sense still. I think it's not Portland itself, but like it's still one of the more like segregated states, which is kind of weird. But it tracks with Oregon's history. So that will be interesting, but I agree. I think the city's in a much better spot to support a women's basketball team. I also just think like it kind of reminds me of like the Grizzlies in Vancouver, where like they weren't ready for it. Like there was the fan base wasn't ready. The
team wasn't that good either. Like Portland Fire never made the playoffs. They never made it.
Yeah, I mean the Grizzlies also sucked when they first started, so I feel like
they were so bad.
So bad. I mean, it gives me that vibe a little of just like I don't think the culture of basketball support was there, and so it was kind of always doomed to fail. The W also had a ton of expansion and contraction in the first like few years of its like life, so I also think that's why Engelbert's been so like hesitant to expand. Is they're really scared of the contraction that happened in the past. I mean, Kathy has her many flaws and problems. I'm not really a big fan, to be honest. Especially her answer. I don't know if you saw her answer to the question about the racism that Angel races and Black players have been facing because of Caitlin Clark fans, and her answer was less than satisfactory. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it was certainly even more inflammatory, and like you could have said a lot of different things, and she picked like the wrongest possible answer to the question, so that was not great. But the expansion thing has been kind of really slow, especially when looking at like the expansion of the NWSL. It's gone crazy in the last like 5 years, and so W fans have definitely been clamoring for this. And like Portland was originally announced with Golden State, and then it fell through. So I'm glad that they figured their shit out and are getting a team back, because that'll be fun. And it's kind of a good location too, because it's like still obviously very close to Seattle, so kind of a natural like Pacific Northwest rivalry there. But then it's also not going to be very far from San Francisco, where that team's going to be, again, geographically kind of an easy rivalry, and then straight down to like LA and whatever. So geographically, I think it's a really good spot. Portland's a pretty big airport, so it's easy to get in and out.
Seattle had a natural rival now right across the way, which is always nice to have, because I don't think they're ever putting a team in Vancouver again.
No.
That's not. It could happen, but that's if we talk about a 30-team league. We're not. I don't think Vancouver's happening anytime soon.
I think the only Canadian W expansion outside of Toronto that will happen might be like Montreal.
That's the only realistic candidate I see.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Hamilton might be higher than Vancouver on their list. Like that.
I mean, honestly, weirdly, like it would never work just from honestly logistics would be way too hard. But like, I do think that the W game in Edmonton kind of proved though that like there is definitely a need for like women's basketball fans in the West would definitely, there's enough of people that would support it. And especially with Edmonton
so far.
Yeah, especially with Edmonton being the home of Team Canada women's basketball, like you have that there at least, but just logistically it'd be way too hard to manage, like, and just getting players to want to live in Edmonton would be a challenge.
It's hard to get people from Alberta to want to live in Edmonton.
I don't want to live in Edmonton, and I am from this place, so it'd be a bit of a challenge. But I think Portland will be a good city. I think it's going to work out well. I'm curious about the branding. I'm really curious to which direction they go, if they try and revive the Fire. Did the Fire fold or did they move?
They folded.
Okay, so that like branding would technically be available. Because like for instance, like the Utah Stars went to San Antonio and now they're the Aces. So like that franchise is one franchise. So I'm kind of curious.
Drexler tried to buy it. They tried to save the franchise, but it didn't work.
Oh, damn. That would have been
really cool, actually. The Blazers legend would have been that would have been super dope. That's a damn shame.
Man, I'm actually really sad Bill Walton passed. I'm sad he passed anyways, but it's like kind of shitty that.
Yeah, he would have loved this.
He would have loved this. Yeah, he would have been amazing. So he would have been like the best person to put on their play-by-play too, just because he's amazing. And who doesn't want to listen to Bill Walton?
Them doing play-by-play instead of color is wild.
Or the color, whatever. Put him on the broadcast.
You might not hear anything that happened on any point.
You will not know. He'll throw the score in every now and then, but yeah, he ain't talking about shit. But
learn what the score is, what you'll know about the human experiences the players are going through.
Which was, like, I feel like to me that's like one of the most important watching experiences in the WNBA is all the like human interest stories that happen around it because that many lesbians in one league, there's going to be some drama.
Yeah, Bill Walton reporting on that would have been an adventure for sure.
Yeah, I am sad.
Elsewhere in WNBA news, well, before we get to playoff stuff, the Mercury keep teasing Diana Taurasi retirement, and they've been doing the whole "if this is it" thing. At the last home game of the regular season, they had a long tribute video. Everybody talked about how thankful they are for her, and former players, current players, coaches, all that stuff. And it's like you were saying earlier when we were talking off the mic, it's probably going to be a game time decision. You know what I mean? She's probably going to get to training camp or close to it and be like, how do I feel? So we might not know for a while, but it would be kind of funny if they did all this tribute stuff for like half a season and then she was like, yep, still open.
I don't get the vibe that she's going to be like Sue Bird where she announces it ahead of time and then has a whole season of goodbyes. Like, I just don't, I don't get that feeling from her because I know she's not quite like the other, like some other players where she wants that spot. It's not like Dwayne Wade's like farewell tour or like Kobe's farewell tour where they kind of want that like spotlight. I don't really think that she wants that necessarily. Yeah. She's never quite been that player. So yeah, I very much get the feeling that she wants to, she'll probably just, like play it, kind of see how she feels. Like, I think the off season will be really big. I mean, the good news is she's mostly gotten through this season without too many like injuries or anything like that. And I know that that's been kind of a big struggle the last few years. With her, she's never really been able to stay healthy through a full season for a long time, just age. But the amount of work she has to put into her body to still keep going is definitely a lot. So I can totally, and LeBron's talked about this too, even like just the amount, especially as you age, the amount of work you have to put into staying at that level you want to stay in, especially when you're, that level of a competitor. It's a lot, and so if you don't feel like you're actually going to be able to do what you want to do, you're not going to want to put that work in, right? Like, it gets harder and harder. So I do think that the playoff run, segueing into that, since it is WNBA playoff time, I do think the playoff run, like how deep the Mercury can actually go, will probably impact things. Like, I do think that we'll just finish on this before we get to the playoffs. But I think that this season, having like, she's even talked about how like having a player like Natasha Cloud around has helped kind of like reinvigorate her. And I do think that the fact that she was able to like play in a more diminished role while other people kind of carried the load was probably very refreshing and helpful to her. And so if, there's a commitment to having talent around the team and whatever, then I feel like she might be more, and they actually like show well in the playoffs. I mean, whether or not, I don't think they really have enough to beat the Lynx, but we'll get to that. But I think that on paper, at least, right? At least they got back to the playoffs. The season went much better. The vibes were just much better, even when they were like not up and down winning and losing wise, but their vibes have been so much better. I think that she might come back. That it's, at least be more willing, right? I think that how they do in the playoffs will definitely say a lot, because obviously she's a competitor and she wants to win. So I'm very curious to see how that pans out. But kind of weird to think of it being like a possible end of an era, though. And even if it's not this season, there's always, it probably would be next, right? So it's kind of just knowing in the next couple of years, like, there will be no more Diana Taurasi on the court. And it's just really weird to think about.
Yeah, I think that if we get absolutely smacked in the first round by the Lynx, I think it's probably a lot more likely to be over. And I do think that some of this, like the quasi farewell tour stuff, has been kind of the team putting it on like as a just in case. I think they know that she probably doesn't want to necessarily have like a victory lap around the entire league for an entire season, and every single game somebody's got a jersey swap with her, and like every team has to do a little ceremony. But I think the team like really wants to like cover the bases, because like if she does retire in the offseason quietly, they don't want to have not paid her respect, especially since she's the greatest player in franchise history, and for
she basically is the franchise
league history.
She basically is the franchise. So I mean,
they put out a video of like, why did you become a Mercury fan? Like, what do you like most about being a Mercury fan? And some people's answer was just Diana Taurasi.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, 20 of 28 seasons, like that's basically your entire franchise history. So it's kind of hard to, I respect the team for doing it, and the way they framed it, it does feel like it's teasing towards the end, but I respect that they probably actually legitimately don't know. And it's at least they want to make sure they did right by their player while they had the chance. So that's good. Like, I feel pretty content with the way that they did that. And there's something to be said about not having like the ceremony at center court at every game for, because they did it with Big Sil, with Sil, and they did it with Sue. And I'm glad that happened, especially for a player like Sylvia Fowles. I don't really think she got her flowers the way she deserved when she retired. Diana obviously will. I do think that, like, to be honest, I still think that her being voted the GOAT with like the whole GOAT ball was a bit kind of like lame. Personally,
I don't know if we need like an official vote for that, but like it kind of just says do what it does.
I just think that GOAT debate was kind of like skewed because it was obvious that it was always going to be her, just because white player. To be honest, that still is a thing. So that was kind of contrived and weird, especially when it just completely ignores players like Cheryl Swoops and Cynthia Cooper and like those players and stuff like that. So, and the historical. Especially because the W just seems hell-bent on like ignoring the fact that the Houston Comets existed.
It still hurts me that that's not one of the expansion teams that they've been talking about. Like, I would love to see a team back in
They
Houston.
never want to go back
to an NHL team in Houston before we see a WNBA team in Houston.
Well, and I think that I've seen some debate about this too, actually, on Twitter, which I do think there's something to it, that like the W doesn't want to go to the South because it's honestly just too black. Like, there's an argument to be made there that like if they could even get rid of the Dream, they probably would. And they seem like hell-bent on ignoring those franchises. Like, they don't want to acknowledge that the Comets existed. They don't really want to like even acknowledge like the Charlotte Sting, right? Like Charlotte would be actually that's actually my like one of my candidates for like best expansion city, because I mean, you have such a deep history of basketball in Carolina, and then now especially that like UNC, Duke, and South Carolina all have good women's basketball programs. Like, you have so much support there. Plus, just being in the Southeast would be like huge again, because Atlanta is really the only like true Southern team aside from like the Dallas Wings.
Atlanta and it's Dallas technically, and that's it. Like, out of all the teams in the league, there's not much in the South.
And Dallas just doesn't.
Way more people in the South than people realize.
Yeah, and Dallas just doesn't have the same like, I don't know, cultural cachet, I think, that would be so important from like a basketball perspective, to be honest. So
Dallas is like one of the biggest cities that no one really gives a shit about culturally, I don't think.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. It just feels kind of like weirdly ignored. So I think that the South, I don't know. It seems like it needs to happen, and it's kind of just frustrating that it's not. And I obviously can't like speak too much to the whole like race argument as a white person, but I do think that there's something to it. Like, I don't want to deny that as being a legitimate thing, because obviously the way that the coverage and discussion about the league and how people are promoted definitely indicates that there's probably a part of that involved. I'm not sure.
Weird case. Like, because like it's like the third most populous state in the country, if I recall. But there's no teams out there. But at the same time, because of the way Florida laws have been with regards to black folks, with regards to like queer folks, like I don't think you want to put a team there for the players' sake.
No, Florida would be.
I get why you would avoid Florida, but there's other parts of the South that maybe would be a little bit more, a little bit better. But like,
I mean, not that Texas or Georgia or any of those places are exactly good, but at least you already have a team there, so it's kind of like easy. And there are states that players want to live in more. Like, Atlanta's a very popular destination for like people to live, like NBA players, WNBA players. A lot of them live in Atlanta in the off season anyway. And so, I don't know. I mean, Atlanta seems to have only been through the airports. I can't actually really comment.
My family used to live out there. I like it quite a bit, but
it looks nice.
It has some problems that are related to being in Georgia.
Yes,
but you know,
but at least
I still like Atlanta a lot.
Well, I think Atlanta, at least culturally, has like, because I think it's the blackest city in America. Last time I read it was.
But it's probably like the cultural capital.
Yeah.
As far as like actual like straight population, it's probably like Detroit or I think Birmingham.
I definitely thought I read somewhere that Atlanta was, but it could also just be positioned that way in terms of like business ownership. I can't remember the context that I read that in, so not quite sure. But yeah, culturally, I think you're totally right. That's absolutely a thing, and I think that probably helps. But the Dream have obviously always had an issue because of just like where they play and like ownership for a long time. So It's improving, obviously, now that Renee Montgomery and her ownership group are in charge. The Dream seem to have like much more of a fan base now, but it's kind of a tough climb. But I do think, just finishing up on expansion, I think Charlotte and Houston deserve to have teams back, because those were very like, especially the Comets, like they're an iconic team. Like, you got to bring them back. And I just really, at the very least, it just really pisses me off that the league does everything they can to just ignore the fact that the Comets existed.
The first dynasty in WNBA history, and still the greatest one, right?
Still the greatest one. Like, the Aces haven't, until they three-peat, like, they're not even touching it. So it's like, I don't know. It just really...
I kind of don't think they will, to be honest.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that, but I think you're right. So I guess speaking of the Dream, we may as well start with our... we're gonna rank the... We're gonna talk about the playoff series kind of in order of how we feel about them. So the first one I guess we're gonna talk about is, like I said, the Dream. They play the Liberty. The Dream beat the Liberty to get into the playoffs, but it was not really the Liberty they're gonna play in the playoffs, because the Liberty gave up on that game real fast and pulled their starters, and it was pretty much like deep bench mob against the Dream. And the Dream didn't even win by that much, so it's a little bit concerning.
Do you believe in this Liberty team? I mean, I think we know. I think we both assume it's a foregone conclusion they're going to beat the Dream. But like, do you believe in this Liberty team? As
no,
they've made the finals, but like, the team that knocked them out last time was they seem to be a little bit weaker than they were previously.
Yeah,
do you think Liberty are serious?
It's like weird, because in my heart I say no, but like my head's like, well, like they were the top of their first number one seed. They had a much better season. The chemistry is better, especially between like with JJ, especially. She had a much better year. Sabrina's cooked this year, much to my chagrin. But I don't know. I still just don't trust them. There's something about that team that I just like. I think because of how bad, to me at least, how bad they looked last year at times in the playoffs. Like Stewie, honestly, until Stewie like absolutely like crushes the playoffs this year, like I don't really trust her, because she wasn't that bona fide star that we all expected in the playoffs last year. She struggled really hard. Like Benijah Laney was actually the most impactful player on that team through the playoffs, and so it's kind of like, until the stars like star like they're supposed to, I just don't really trust them. There's something about it. I'll admit I haven't watched a ton of their games this season. I just honestly don't have a strong desire to, weirdly, for as good as they are. I don't know. There's something about it I don't trust in my heart of hearts. I'm not really buying the Liberty, but I do think obviously they'll beat the Dream. The Dream are just far too up and down in my opinion. I don't know. They went on 2 very long losing skids this year, so they don't seem to be able to put too many games together before they go on like a 10-game losing streak or some shit. So not really sure about the Dream. I think the Liberty will take care of that, but I am definitely more curious about the next rounds, and particularly the finals. I don't know. I just have a bad taste in my mouth still from the finals last year. The Liberty are very much a prove-it team to me, because much like the Sun, like we'll get to, but
Celtics. I was thinking like Celtics vibes were
that too.
But they just hadn't gotten over the hump yet. They didn't seem serious enough to do so until they finally did. Yeah,
I think that's a good example, because they're very deep, like the Celtics too, right? They've got those like top end talent. I think that their success will very much be predicated on how well Stewie and Sabrina play at the end of the day. They're probably their 2 most important players in my mind. Like Benijah has been bringing it. I'm not really worried about her, especially because she brought it last year. JJ's in a much better spot, so she's important to them. But I really think how well Stewie and Sabrina play, because I think they're their 2 leading scorers. I didn't really look.
Yep.
So
third. Yep.
Yeah, so like Sloot is still very good as a point guard. She's kind of past her days as like a main offensive engine in terms of scoring, but she doesn't need to be on a team like that, so that's fine. I trust her at the end of the day. She's kind of still my favorite point guard in the league. I'll always love Sloot. But yeah, I don't know. I just I almost called it the Celtics. I won't trust the Liberty until the Liberty actually wins, to be honest. I'm also like, and I love Sandy Brondello as a coach, but I also, because did she win in Phoenix?
I do too. Let me go on the record. I'm still sad that they got rid of her, because her replacement was extremely not it.
Woof. That was not good. The Vanessa Nygaard era was
that was a fucking disaster. And it was like, it wasn't like it was one of those things that started off nice, then coach bounced and it fell apart. It was from day one.
It was never good.
From day one.
To be honest, that hire always felt to me like Just realized my computer came unplugged. That's not great. Anywho, the Nygaard era always felt to me like they hired. So I felt a certain way about Diana Taurasi in that era because it felt very much like she was single-handedly destroying the Mercury, because it felt like she was the cause of some of the chemistry issues in terms of her lack of accountability. And she also, I felt, was the reason that Nygaard got hired. And that was very like, I don't know, it just felt very LeBron-esque to me. So I agree. The Nygaard era was not good. And I think getting rid of Sandy was definitely questionable.
Yeah, it didn't even seem like it was like anything particularly bad with the coaching that got her fired. They had expectations, I think, that year that were a little bit unrealistic.
I think that season, well, because I think she got was it the year after their finals run that she got fired, or was it the finals run against Chicago?
I believe so.
I think it was, yeah, I mean, because like, to be honest, like the whole Skylar Diana thing was just always really like sketchy. And so relationship wise, and I feel like, I also think, to be honest, I wonder if Sandy left partially because she was just done with that and wanted like a fresh scene, and probably saw what was coming with the Liberty and like Stewie, because even though Stewie went back to Seattle for that first year, she did have that free agent visit with New York, and I feel like there was probably something cooking in the background. It's a small league. People aren't stupid, you know, coaches and players, they kind of see what's going on. So yeah, I think Sandy's a really good coach for New York. But yeah, we'll see. I think the personalities are a lot easier to manage on that team than they were in Phoenix, and I think that's probably what undid Phoenix. But yeah, I don't know. The Celtics, oh my God, the Liberty. Jesus, I keep calling them the Celtics. Damn you. This comparison. Now I'll never be able to unhear it or unsee it.
Who is Jason Tatum on the New York Liberty? No, we're not going to go there.
Sabrina, to be honest. She cooks in the regular season, but
she does have her own shoe.
Her playoff performances have not been great.
Wait, speaking of Sabrina having her own shoe, shout out to Ellie the Elephant for getting her own colorway.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna be honest, I love the elephant print on it. Like it's amazing because that's like one of my favorite design elements that Nike does is that elephant. Mm-hmm. Like, so it looks so cool with the teal. I honestly, like, I'm not even obviously I'm not a big Sabrina fan, but I do like her shoes. They're pretty cool. Yeah, and the Sabrina 2 is really nice. I like it much better than the one. I mean, all of Nike's shoes look too much like Kobe's now, but they're pretty nice. And they're really popular in the NBA too. Players like love playing in them, so I think they're a really well made shoe. But yeah, the Ellie has a stranglehold on my heart and the league. I love Ellie. Yeah. She does too much every time, and it's the perfect amount. She is like the right vibe for a mascot. I have big hopes for the new Sky mascot, but well, yeah. Anyway. Speaking of mascot,
after the first time I ever heard like in the announcement video, I don't think I've ever seen a mascot be given a voice before. I think this is the first time I've ever seen it.
Yeah, actually, that's a fair.
Kind of like narrating. I was like, they've always been silent, like Link from Zelda. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, anyways, to finish up our lack of analysis on this series, do you feel like it's going to be a Liberty sweep?
I think there's going to be one game that's really, really close. I think it's going to be a sweep.
Yeah. I don't know. Part of me, like, I really love Ryan Howard. I guess we should probably talk about the Dream a little bit. I love Ryan Howard, and Tina Charles is having a really good season there. I think she was a great fit. I'm really happy for Tina Charles because she managed to kind of get her legacy back on track a little bit. Her last few stops were a little bit chaotic, and that
weird quarter season stint with Phoenix that just ended abruptly.
She went to Seattle, didn't go there how she wanted. I don't know. Really weird situation with Tina. So I'm happy that she's had a really good year in Atlanta because, yeah, I don't know. I think she's a legendary player who deserves that. I'm also glad she went to a team like Atlanta rather than just sort of like ring chasing, because I think she actually added a lot of she was really beneficial to that team. So like the Dream have good talent. To be honest, the thing I don't trust about the Dream is actually the coaching. So like I never feel like Tanisha Wright puts her players in a position to actually succeed, and so like they succeed because Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray and Tina Charles and Cheyenne Parker are really good. But doesn't really feel like it's because of coaching or scheme. So that's where I just don't trust them in the playoffs at all, is that really, in a lot of ways, the playoffs do come down to coaching and scheme. Like, the players have to play well, but you also need those coaching adjustments and those kinds of things that help make your life easier for your players. So I don't know.
Even if they made the playoffs and improved at the end of the season, at the end of the day, we're still talking about a team that went 14-25, right? We're talking about a team that had the worst field goal percentage in the WNBA, the second lowest 3-point percentage in the WNBA. I just don't think they can score enough to compete with the Liberty, who just have, like, everyone on that roster can shoot.
Yeah.
Well, even Phil Jones is almost a 40% 3-point shooter now. Like, they just have so much.
And they have a deep bench. Like, Leonie Fibic has been really good for them this year.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have Maureen Johannes back, but I mean, Fibic pretty much fits that role. So she's not quite as exciting as Maureen Johannes, but she fits that role really well as a backup point guard. Even having Sabrina be able to play point guard like she did for a lot of the season when Sloot was out was probably really good, because she was a point guard in the past, and I think that Sabrina's best role in the Liberty has been as like an off-ball scorer and kind of just benefiting from the gravity of the other players, but like, she's capable of doing it, right? So at least you have that to fall back on, and you can put the ball in her hands. The Dream have a lot of top-end talent. The bench is what's really questionable. Like, Haley Jones hasn't been what they hoped she would be. Letitia Amy here, I love her, but same thing, hasn't quite really popped in the W like everyone hoped. She's had a better season, but yeah, the Dream have gotten hot at times, but they're very streaky. They'll go on a winning streak and then they'll go on a massive losing streak. So it just feels too up and down. They're like a classic 8 seed where you're like,
yeah,
I don't know.
One of those old-timey Eastern Conference 8 seeds that's like, way below 5. Like,
the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic of
NBA TV as 8 seed. Like, I kind of hope that with expansion we'll see fewer teams that are 11 games below 500 get into the playoffs. Because 12 teams get in, it's gonna be you're gonna get a team in there that's not.
The odds are just better that you have to have a better.
But there's two teams with losing records in the postseason this year.
Yeah. Huh.
One of which is my team, which
yeah, so I guess I don't know what else to say about the Liberty and Dream. I feel bad for kind of shortchanging the series, but it's also like, I just think it's going to go how it's going to go. It's not quite as compelling to me as the other ones, because they're just not as strong as the team. Yeah, they're
the team is 14-25.
Yeah, like, and I don't even know who would have been a better 8 seed option, because like none of the teams are very good. I mean, from a storyline perspective, it would have been really interesting if Washington had done it, because they own Atlanta's first round pick. And so it would have been really funny if they made the playoffs and potentially won the lottery on Atlanta's pick. So just from a storyline perspective, that would have been really fascinating. And I mean, I love Aaliyah Edwards, so it would have been cool to see her in the playoffs. But Washington was never really going to do that. Chicago, for a portion of the season, I thought maybe could challenge, but there's just too much that needs to be figured out on that roster. And honestly, like, I'm not disappointed. I mean, I'm not disappointed that we didn't make the playoffs. I wasn't expecting it, and honestly didn't necessarily want it. Like, yeah, I didn't want to be that ahead of schedule, for being honest, just because I think there's too many things that need to be figured out. And the Sky fan base is kind of the worst right now, just because of all the new fans. I love them, but they need to learn more about the team. And kind of the same issue that I think the league's had with Caitlin Clark fans coming in, is also a lot of like Angel Reese fans and people like that who are just like, oh wow, everyone's trash. And it's like, no, like, Angel's the rookie here. Like, let's calm down. I think there's a lot of hope and promise in Chicago, but there's some shit that needs to get figured out. We can kind of do like a postmortem on those teams on another episode though. Yeah, I guess for RIP. Yeah, but we may as well take a really quick break, and then we can get to the others, because yeah, I am low on wine. I don't know about you. All right. So yeah, next up we got I guess first off, actually sort of halfway point. How are you feeling about the wine?
It has, during the break between the parts of the podcast, the wine has started to kick in, which means my accent might come out a little bit more. Sorry to all the listeners out in Canada. And also, I guess, anywhere else in the world, I might have to deal with some letters not being pronounced. And, that's okay. That's okay. I'm going to be my This can be my truest self out here.
Love that. Love that for us.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. Go on. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's a little 13%. It's a little on the boozier side, but it's not bad. It's
Is it Erath or Erath?
I don't actually know. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know.
They did not put a pronunciation guide on the bottle.
They did not.
No tasting notes either. We're on our own on this.
Well, the tasting notes I do have, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, both from what I can sort of pick out and what the actual thing says. So, crap, where'd it go?
I feel like it's like opened up a little more now that like the black tea that I had before recording is worn off. Like I'm tasting a little bit more of like the depth of the wine. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Before I had just finished some Earl Grey, so I wasn't really getting the full experience.
Yeah, that'll happen. So yeah, like we talked about, there's definitely a bit more minerality in it. So you kind of get like, there's a little bit of kind of, I don't know, apparently the tasting notes people picked out like oak vibes, but I'm not really getting any of that. I'm not getting any vanilla or tobacco or anything like that. I'm not really even sure how long it was actually aged for, or if it was aged in oak. So I'm not really getting that, but I am getting like earthy vibes, like definitely some kind of like a mushroom, kind of like that, like umami flavor a little bit. Definitely, yeah, like you said though, it's a really fruit forward. So like fresh red fruit, like maybe some red currant, definitely some strawberry and cherry, like kind of like Rainier cherries, like those really bright red cherries. Definitely getting a lot of like that kind of vibe from it. Definitely not my favorite Pinot Noir, I have to admit, but I don't mind it. I also same
solid 8.5, 8 out of 10, maybe.
Yeah, I'm also the same. My palate's kind of opened up a little bit more, so I'm tasting a little bit more. I ate right before this, so it kind of influenced that. But I didn't want to be like too messed up on the pod, so here we are. Yeah, I definitely smell more of like those earthy notes than I necessarily. It's just that like minerality that you kind of get. But yeah, it's not bad. It's very light though. Like it's pretty. It's like, I guess for those who can't see us because we're not a video podcast yet. It's definitely like a pretty like bright ruby color, but it's not super intense because you can very much see through it. So yeah. It's pretty light. Definitely higher on the alcohol though at 13% for sure. It's a little bit on the boozier side, and you can see that in the glass too with the legs. So
you can get that from the sweetness a little bit too.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Not too much. It's pretty dry actually for a Pinot. Yeah. Well, I guess quick sort of tasting note. When you look at wine, like you always like tilt the glass 45 degrees and kind of hold it up against like ideally something white in the background. My desk is white, which is pretty sick. And then the intensity essentially is like how you gauge the color is definitely ruby. So there's ruby, garnet, and then like purple or like much more aged wines are like brown or tawny. This is definitely a ruby red. And like the intensity, you kind of like when you tilt it, you're essentially looking from like the center of the glass out to the rim. And so like the waterier the rim, the less intense the color is. Kind of the more you can see through it. So that's like always the first step of wine tasting. And then obviously you smell. But when you get like the drips sort of down the side, called the legs, that like indicates the alcohol level. So the more alcohol, the more legs you're going to get on your wine. So the more you're going to see that on your glass. Yeah.
Anyway. That's advanced. I only learned the smell, swirl, sip. Like I didn't get that far into it. But like also my job at the wine shop I worked at was to sell liquor. So like every wine thing I learned was by somebody else's kindness or being generous with their time or by accident.
That's fair. Yeah. So it's actually the 5 S's of wine tasting are sight, smell, swirl, sip, savor. So
I only taught me 3.
Yeah.
The beginner level.
So yeah, like the color is pretty normal. So yeah, the idea is to look at it, determine like the color and the color intensity. So like what color it is. Mm-hmm. So like a Malbec is usually going to be a little more purple. A red wine that's like very red, like a ruby. A garnet is when it has a little bit more of a purple tinge to it. And then usually like something like brown or tawny, you're going to have like, it's going to be a lot more aged or like a fortified wine in particular.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so you want to like determine and whether or not it's also clear or hazy, if there's sediment, that kind of stuff, you're indicating that. And then, yeah, you sniff it first and then you swirl it to give it air. So you want to get like the initial like aroma palette before you give it air by swirling. So that is the process. Another fun tasting tip that I recommend is when you like go to actually taste it, always take a really big whiff first, because most of tasting is smelling. So I think like 70 or 80% of tasting is smelling. But after you swallow, exhale, like kind of like, you know, most of us, obviously, you hold your breath when you're drinking. So when you take a sip, like exhale through your nose rather than through your mouth, and it will open up your palate, so you'll get more flavor on it. And sometimes too, like...
Well, luckily, I'm not a mouth breather anyway, so...
Yeah. No, but like it's pretty common, like after you take a sip, you'll kind of just like exhale through your mouth or whatever, but always make sure you actually like basically like take a big breath in as you're drinking and like sniff it, like get a really good whiff, and then like exhale through your nose, and it will definitely kind of open your palate. Sometimes too, people will like hold wine like in their mouths and kind of swish it around in their mouths just to get like mouthfeel, because that's how you determine things like acidity. So how you figure out acidity in wine is how much your mouth waters, essentially. And then how you figure out tannin is how dry your mouth feels actually after. So you can't really have acidity and tannin necessarily because they counterbalance each other. But yeah, fun times. Anyways, we
gotta get speaking of Malbec, we gotta hope that Pablo Prigioni gets a head coaching job so we can do a Malbec. So I need to break open an Argentinian wine, man. That shit is phenomenal.
I miss the good old days of too bad we don't have a Manu in the league anymore, or Luis Scola.
Oh my god, Luis Scola. Just fucking pivoting people to death.
The fact that he's really still... I'm pretty sure
people to hell.
Is he still playing for Team Argentina? Like, he's still kicking around, which is pretty wild.
I think he did very recently. Like, I think in one of the championships he did.
Not that long ago.
Yeah, he was like, he was in his 40s. I'm pretty certain he was in his 40s.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
It's a W.
Speaking of players in their 40s.
Speaking of, that's a great segue. Okay.
Speaking of players in their... Speaking of players in their 40s and legends, we've got Lynx Mercury next. So this one I think is definitely also... I think there's just a lot of heavy favorites in these, at least these like two lower seeded series, for sure.
Yes.
So as a Mercury fan,
the Lynx scare me.
I'll let you start this one since you're the resident Mercury fan.
I feel like I'm in the mid-2010s again because I am once again absolutely terrified of the Minnesota Lynx. It's been a while, since the Maya Moore era when they truly terrified me, but now I think we're kind of getting back to that range. They're not necessarily the most dominant team in the league anymore, but they're at that level now where they're starting to be whooping our ass. Like, the Mercury have played the Lynx 4 times this season, lost by double digits 3 times, and the one time the Mercury won is by 1 point. So I'm not particularly optimistic going into this series, especially since the best Mercury ball was kind of mid-season. Late season, it's been, if they're playing somebody other than Chicago, they've been getting just absolutely smacked, including in a bunch of home games, which is a shame because there's been a lot of sellout crowd. So it's not like there hasn't been the conditions necessary for home court advantage. Like, they've been there. The X Factor's been great. It's just, they've just been playing really terrible basketball. And it's weird because the early season, deluge of awful turnovers seems to have slowed a bit. Like, you look at the box scores recently, and it hasn't been 21 turnover games and outrageous shit like that. They've just kind of been bad. They haven't rebounded well or defended well or shot well. And it feels like they're a little too reliant on, can we get hot?
Yeah, they're pretty streaky. I would agree with that. On the other side of the ball, the Lynx are really good. How truly, I'm not going to say they're back to the 2010s dominance level because I don't know. This team is pretty new. A lot of these players are free agent acquisitions like Cordy Williams, Alana Smith, Natisha Heidemann. But they definitely have had some really good internal growth, like Bridget Carlton having a huge year from 3. She's shooting 45% or something crazy. So she carried over her EuroLeague success from 3. So I'm really happy for her. I wish she would have brought more of that for Team Canada, but here we are. It's fine. Everything's fine. Nafisa Collier, also MVP. She's back on her. She's been improving every year. It's crazy that she's 2 years removed from having a child, and she's out here just cooking folks. She's been really fun to watch this year. She is pretty dominant, and I think if it wasn't for Asia Wilson having the single greatest season ever, Nafisa would have a better shot at winning MVP. But I think that the kind of I think when Fee came in the league too, there was a bit of a okay, Fee and Asia are going to kind of be those, almost like what Asia and Stewie were supposed to sort of be, but Stewie's been around longer. I think Fee and Asia are kind of, because they came in around the same time. A couple years away, but
she's a little younger than Asia too, right? Like I think
like
she's got a shot still at Yeah, she's still got a shot at winning a couple, especially as like if Asia declines at all, we don't even know. She might be one of those ones who just keeps fucking going
forever. Yeah, which I think Asia's game will age well, especially because she's a good shooter. She can step out to three, but I think Fee, like Fee's had an amazing season and she keeps getting better. I think she's really just hitting her prime now, so it's good for Minnesota to finally have that like super bona fide star kind of to take over from the Lyndsay Whalen, Maya Moore, Sylvia Fowles kind of days. There was definitely a few down years there. And I think some of that was between Fee and Sil also, just trying to figure out who's the leader of that team. And then Fee also being young in the league. She's really, and then, really the fact she was gone for like a year or two because of maternity leave as well, right? Like that's a year removed. Yep. Even though her age is just, like, I don't even actually really know how old, I don't know what her age is, but her number of years in the league, like you kind of have to subtract one just because she was out that whole year. So she's been really fun to watch this year, though. She's been crazy, crazy good. Kayla McBride's their second leading scorer. She's been playing really. She's
the one who scares me. Like as great as Collier is, the player who terrifies me the most is McBride because she lets that shit go real quick from real deep, and she is a 40.7% 3-point shooter. That's way above league average, right? And like we're talking about a team that's there's two things that really, really terrify me about the Lynx. One is that you got a Mercury team that commits some hilarious turnovers.
My God, it's bad.
The Lynx are second in steals in the league. Yeah. They're also the best 3-point shooting team in the league. And we are not exactly great at closing out our shooters. So they worry me considerably. They're also the leading they're the leading in assists too. So offensively, man, they just hum. Everybody has a role to play. Everyone contributes. They almost have they're really close to having 5 players average double digits, which is really hard to do in a 40-minute game.
Yep. They look like a Cheryl Reeve team. Again, this looks like what Cheryl Reeve needed in a team because they don't even really have that like super traditional point guard, but you don't need it when you have a player like Fee. And then, like, I think Courtney Williams was an amazing addition. She's a playoff killer, too. She's really good from that mid-range, right? And then I really think that, like, Alana Smith, like, her come-on season in Chicago last year and now coming to Minnesota, she's been amazing, too. They cut well off the ball. They pass a lot. They just look like a classic Cheryl Reeve team. Like, Cheryl Reeve has never needed a traditional point guard to make her teams work. And she messed around with having one a couple years with, like, Crystal Dangerfield, players like that. But I think now this is like her kind of team. They defend hard. They shoot well. They pass. And like that game, the most recent game I saw them play against the Sun a couple games ago, they like collapsed pretty hard in the last part of the game, but just the number of back cuts and just like plays they make that way was like pretty impressive. So they're really fun to watch. And the other thing too, like from a coaching matchup, like Cheryl Reeve is obviously a legendary coach, and Nate Tibbett is untested. So I don't know. We'll see. He's been better this year. Like I have to eat crow on him. He's been a much better coach than I expected this year. Especially definitely a palate cleanser after the Vanessa Nygaard debacle.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a lot that can be cleaned up. I think like turnovers and things like that are very much like a coaching situation, just like attention to detail. But yeah, the Mercury are just, I don't know. They're hard to like put your finger on because they like, when they're hot, they look really good. Like they look really good. You're like, damn, they've got talent. And like the other thing that the Mercury should be able to exploit in theory is size. Like the Lynx aren't that big inside.
The Mercury are kind of in a weird spot because they, outside of having one of the biggest players in the league, they're a small team too. I mean, I guess you could say that Taurasi's a big guard, right?
Tasha Mack, but they've got like bigger forwards because they've got Tasha Mack, they've got Kiki.
The starting lineup only has like one big though. It's just Griner and a bunch of wings and guards, right? And that's kind of that's part of the rebounding issue is that Griner hasn't rebounded all that well.
She never
has. They're not built to make up for that.
So like
nobody else in that starting lineup is a great rebounder.
No, the thing with Griner is that she has her career rebounding average is not that great. Like she has a reputation as a better rebounder than she actually is. And I think some of that is size. Just she's big, so she does get rebounds, but I don't think she's as good of a rebounder as she could be for her size. But you could definitely say the same thing about Kalia Copper. I love Ka. And if Ka plays like the MVP candidate that she was at the beginning of the year, then the Mercury do have a chance. But the challenge is just that, none of them rebound very well. Whereas like Minnesota is very much a gang rebounding team because like Courtney Williams, pound for pound, is one of the best rebounders for a guard. Bridget Carlton will get in there and throw some elbows. Like she's tough and she's pretty gritty and she makes those hustle plays. Even McBride will rebound. Obviously, Fee is a good rebounder. Lana Smith is a good rebounder. Right. So you're right. Like sort of down the roster, the Lynx are just a better gang rebounding team, even though they're not necessarily a very big team. Because I'm pretty sure Fee jumps. I'm pretty sure Fee jumps in the center. I think Fee plays center for the most part for the Lynx right now. So, or like functionally plays as center because I think she does the jump ball. So it's they're kind of like the Aces in that sense. Or the Lynx really remind me of the Aces a little bit and how they're built. They just don't have that like dominant point guard. But just in terms of that, like Fee and Asia are very similar to me in terms of just like stylistically. I think Fee is a better distance shooter, but like they're very similar players. And I think that I think Asia's obviously overall better, but like they give me similar kind of vibes. So yeah, I don't know. The Lynx are definitely a better rebounding team. That is for sure. I just think, I don't know. The Mercury they're weird because I've watched them play really good games and I've watched them play some just atrocious basketball, and there's not a lot of in between. So they're pretty high variance.
Yeah, looking at like going back to the rebounding stats, like Griner leads the team with 6.6 a game, which isn't a lot, right? I mean, Chicago Sky have a rookie averaging 13, which obviously is an incredible amount, but not to compare to the best rebounder in the game.
But I would say that like any player
it's less than half.
Any player who's that big should be averaging like a minimum of 8 rebounds a game.
Right. The second leading rebounder, and this is where it gets interesting, second leading rebounder among the starters, I should say, not on the entire team, but among the starters is Copper at 4.5. They don't really have a second rebounder. You know what I mean? They don't have a second quality rebounder in the starting line.
I mean, you could argue they don't even have one.
4.5 is good for a 3, but
she's
you need somebody at the 4 who can do it. You know what I mean? And they don't really have that. Like Cunningham isn't. She tries, I think, but under 4 a game, and she's the nominal 4 sometimes. Yeah, it's not enough.
Yeah, they definitely play, like, I don't know. I think Kalia could certainly rebound more, but also with the style that they want to play, right? They want to get players like Ka out running, and so when you're hedging, that way you're never going to have anybody back rebounding. I don't think they even have, to be honest, I don't think they have one good rebounder, because I do think that Griner needs to be, like, I just honestly believe any player that big should be able to rebound 8 times a game minimum.
Yeah, and because of some of their defensive problems, they have some good defensive players in the lineup, but I think with Beck Allen out, they've been forced to play a lot of zone, and a lot of teams that play zone are not good at finding their player and boxing them out, right?
No.
In man-on-man situations, it's a little bit easier because you're responsible for this person, and even if there's a switch or a hedge or whatever, you know who you're responsible for, you grab them, you box them. In the zone, people can get through. You know, you have an area, you might have 2 people in your area and you don't know which one to go to. Yeah. A lot of times it's really, really easy to get offensive boards against the zone.
Yeah.
And I think the Mercury are really bad about letting players walk right through that zone and just snatch boards on them.
There's a lot of things about the Mercury that I think just come down to like a lack of attention to detail.
Yeah.
Which is like that kind of thing. It's like those small things. And I think that's really where they get beat on the margins, because like shooting numbers are shooting numbers. Like, you're going to play a shitty, you're going to have bad shooting games. That's just how it goes in the league. It's a make or miss kind of game. But if you aren't consistently playing defense and just doing those little things to kind of shore up the other parts, then you're never going to really have a chance, right? And so it's like, it's easier to overcome bad shooting when you are playing really well on the other end of the floor, or at least are like even having good offensive possessions. Like, it's not even like sometimes like the Mercury have a lot of good offensive possessions. They just end in a missed shot. There's a lot of times where it's like, what exactly are you doing? Like, I think T Cloud's been really good there, but there's definitely a lot of moments where I don't think she's quite the point guard of like setting up the offense like she probably could be. It seems like just like a lot of aimless possessions, and so then when they do have a really good one where they click and they get a good shot and they make it, it's like, okay, cool. So they they have things in, like Tibbet has things in his tool bag as plays that are being called, and they've got the players to execute things. It just seems kind of like I don't really know what they're doing sometimes. It's just kind of confusing. I think they also kind of lack an identity at times compared to, say, a team like the Lynx. Like, you kind of know who the Lynx are, you know? And some of that is, I think...
They're going to show it.
Yeah, like, I think part of that is also just, again, like a strong coach, like, you know, like a Greg Popovich team. You know what a good Greg Popovich team looks like. Same with, like, Cheryl Reeve. You know what you're going to get, right? She's, like, a legendary post coach. I mean, Frick Don Staley had her come in and talk to the Post South Carolina pretty recently. Like, she's a legendary post coach, and she just has a certain style that she wants to play with, and you can see it when it's clicking, and you're like, okay, cool, that looks like our Cheryl Reeve team. This is the Lynx. This is their identity. They kind of have that, whereas the Mercury, I think, are still figuring that out, and I feel optimism for the team. Like, whether or not they get smoked in this series, which is probably going to happen, I think that they have, like, a good runway. I think that they have more chances to be good, you know, going forward. The Diana Taurasi thing is still a question, obviously, but I would still feel really good about this season if I was a fan of the Mercury or whatever. But yeah, there's just a lot of
last year.
Oh yeah, just a lot of, like, I don't know. There's like a lot of, like, just kind of random aimlessness that I can't quite figure out with that team sometimes. So
I actually do want to circle back to the shooting numbers a little bit, because you talked about like shooting numbers are what they are, right? There's one thing I do want to bring up. So they're middle of the pack in terms of field goal percentage and 3-point percentage, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that those things have been trending downward.
Mm-hmm.
So beginning of the season, Kalia Copper was on fire from outside, but she settled down at the end of the season at 31.4% from three. And a lot of that has kind of been a slump post Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And I think the whole team really has had a slump post Olympics. Like Cloud wasn't shooting well from three from the beginning of the season, to be completely honest, but barely over 30%, and she shoots a decent number of them. Even Cunningham's
she's gonna struggle. She's struggled this year.
Good. But, like, still lately hasn't been as good as she was earlier. Like, there's a lot of players who are kind of in that low 30s, high, like 20s-ish range. Honestly, you know who leads the team in 3-point percentage? It's Brittany Griner.
Weird. Sophie
50%.
Sophie hasn't been she hasn't felt as automatic this year as in the past. Which that
early season, I feel like she had it going, but now I feel like the last month or so, that hasn't quite been the same.
No, I do think the Olympics probably put that you can tell that it's put a strain on certain players. Like, you can just tell the fatigue. Yep. But I mean, it's also, you have a team like Minnesota. They've got at least 3 or 4 players that were in the Olympics, and they're playing just fine. So it's a bit hard to say. I will say this, though, about the Mercury, and I think we should probably move on to the next series after this, but actually about Beck Allen's former team, I think Beck Allen has been probably, like, her lost season, I think, has probably been a much bigger deal for the Mercury than anybody has mentioned or really talked about very much, because she is, like, that perfect 4. Like, she's not super big, but she's a very feisty rebounder. She's a really good shot blocker. She moves, she cuts, like, she's just kind of that good, like, gap filler that you need on a team with a lot of ball handlers, like Kalia Copper and Cloud and even Taurasi. Like, good for Taurasi for moving off ball as much as she has. She's been really good that way. But it's probably not great when you just miss that, like, 3-and-D kind of measure, because Beck Allen's a pretty good 3-point shooter. She's a really good defender. And she's a good rebounder for her size.
Yep.
So
she is to them what OG Anunoby was to the Knicks this last season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even she kind of is
in a place when she's there.
She's kind of like honestly, like even on the other side of the court of this series, like Alana Smith, like, just fits that really perfect role where she's got enough size that she can kind of play in the middle, like next to Fee, next to a smaller center. Yep. I mean, obviously, the Mercury have Griner, who's a bigger center, but she's not exactly like a great rebounder like we talked about. And I do think that she's lost some mobility. I don't know how much of that is just age and how much of that is, like, obviously her whole situation with being in captivity for, a long time in Russia and not playing for, like, a while, right? Like, I don't know
how
much. But I do think she's declined as a player a little bit. Obviously very good, and I love Brittany Griner a lot, so this is not meant to be slander, but I do think she's declined a bit as a player, so she's not quite her peak self, and I do think we all still view her that way, even though she's not. So
she's also 33 and a big, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like,
these things do happen.
it's age, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, I guess
Still open, still almost 60% from the field. But
yeah.
I mean, it's been what it is. I feel like this is my little segue here. The Mercury and the Fever have gone in different directions, I feel like, since
Yes.
the Olympic break. Like, one team has really fucking soared from the Olympic break and
Yeah.
declined. And I think this is a good time to get into Fever talk, man. They've been they've been hooping. They've been hooping.
They have been since the Olympic break was good for them. They needed it badly. I think obviously players like Caitlin Clark really needed that time. But I think that it also was really good for their coaching staff because there was a lot of people coming for Christy Sides' head. And
unfairly.
I mean, she made
a bunch of young players.
They made a lot of mistakes too, and there's no denying that, but she'll own that. And she has. I mean, the thing is that you have a roster that you have to try and figure out. And like she's still a pretty new head coach. Last year was only her first year, so it's not like she's had a lot of time with this roster. And there were like some big changes to the roster, like Katie Lou Samuelson coming over, Demiris Dantas, Temi Fedbenley, and then obviously Caitlin Clark, and then trying to also mesh like Nalissa Smith, Aaliyah Boston. Like there's a lot of talent top to bottom on that roster. Playoff wise, they've been hot, so we'll see if they can continue that. The one thing I'm truly worried about is that none of them have been in the playoffs. I think like the only players on that team that have any playoff experience are like Demiris Dantas. I don't know about Katie Lou Samuelson. Yeah, she's been in the playoffs, I'm pretty sure.
It'll be interesting. Will it be a rude awakening, like the first time playing playoff ball, or
especially
trying it upward?
It's going to be interesting because they're also playing against a team who very much reminds me of the Celtics, where they've been in the playoffs a million times and they've made it to the finals even, and they've never gotten over the hump. Like I think the Sun have they've won the most playoff games while never winning a title, and so they've got a team that is motivated. They're veterans. Like I mean, they've got Dewana and AT and Brianna Jones and oh my god, I just blanked. But they have a lot of players that are Marina Mabry even, and Mabry's got stuff to prove now. They've got Taisha Harris has been really good. They've got a really deep veteran team who knows who they are and how to play, and they defend really hard. Dijonay, they've been in the playoffs. They've got experience. They've got good chemistry. So, and like the other thing too is that I feel like the Sun, more than any other team to some extent, have almost been kind of like pitted against the Fever in terms of like narrative wise, just with like Dijonay and AT, right? Like they feel that disrespect kind of thing, and so like I think they're going to come for Caitlin's head, and that's going to be really interesting because especially since like just to me like Indiana's best players are unproven, right? Like Kelsey Mitchell's been in the league a long time and she's never been to the playoffs, so I'm really curious to see how well she does. I think she'll hoop, but I'm also still like not sure, right? You just never know.
She asked oh my God, D'Angelo Russell for playoff advice. Recently.
Yikes.
I mean, there's so many players in the NBA, dude. Like, I feel like
better choices to go for.
Yeah.
Interesting choice and player to ask advice from. But
no, nothing against D'Angelo Russell, but like, I feel like there were other options. Like you
even on their NBA like sister team, like the freaking Pacers, like there are better players on the Pacers to ask. Go to Pascal Siakam, go to like even go to Tyrese Halliburton, because like this was Halliburton's first time as like
in the city.
Like truly electric guard in the playoffs. Like go to him, man. Like I don't know. Anyway, that's a weird choice. D'Angelo Russell is a choice.
One thing about the Fever like early in the season, there was a whole bunch of. It was rough, right? There were people like, oh, it was killing like a fraud, blah, 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 blah. And, most reasonable people were like, hey, this is a team there's a reason this team had consecutive number one picks. There's a reason they haven't been they haven't had a winning record in like a decade, right? But I don't think there's anyone who could reasonably have expected that they'd be first in field goal percentage at the end of the season. Like that was really surprising.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think honestly, I'm not really worried about the Fever offense just because even though they're obviously all unproven, I do think that they just have the requisite skills to be good in the playoffs. I'm a little worried about fouling, just because the games are called differently. And I know that they've struggled a bit with that. But what I'm honestly just the thing I'm worried about the most with the Fever is their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't necessarily have a lot of great defensive players. Obviously, Aaliyah Boston's very good. And she's a great anchor. But yeah, I'm a bit, and like players like oh my God, Christy Wallace, I'm like the Australian. She's a good defensive player, and they've got some decent players, but and like Lexi Hall, they'll deploy her probably for sure more in the playoffs as a defender, but they don't particularly have like a good balance like Connecticut, for instance. Whereas I think Indiana has to make a lot more defense for offense kind of substitutions. So that's going to be interesting. And just the attention to detail on defense, again, just a really young team. But I do think it's good for the Fever to be there, even if they lose, which I do think they will. I think that they took advantage, to be honest, of being probably the most rested team coming out of the Olympic break. And so I don't want to say that their success is like false, but I also think some other teams kind of struggled out of the gate. And they took advantage of that, which is what you're supposed to do, right? Like they did their job. They won the games they're supposed to win. You can only play who's in front of you. And they took care of business. But I do think that the playoffs are a different animal, and teams like Connecticut are going to be motivated to keep it going. And they want to win a title. I mean, they have Diana is kind of in the twilight of her career, right? And she's still hooping at a very high level, but you don't know how long that's going to happen, right? You never know. AT, like she's had an injury history. She's been really good, but I mean, she still doesn't have shoulders. So there's that. Yeah, you want to win, right?
You're making me think of like the dude with no neck from from fucking 90 Day Fiance.
Ed, Big Ed.
Yeah.
I hate that I know that. I've watched too much of that show, I have to admit. I'm pretty embarrassed.
So good, I'm not gonna lie.
It's really hard to not watch that show. Damn. Anyways, yeah, I feel like, but you're right. Like her lack of labrums. But you have a very veteran team that you want to win with, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that the Sun are going to be kind of going for broke here, and I think that they'll win. I think they'll beat the Fever. I also trust the coaching a little more. Stephanie White, I think, has more experience on a WNBA bench and in the playoffs than Christy Sides. So I think White knows how to deploy her players much better. So there's also that. But I think it'll be good for the Fever. I think they'll play the Sun really well. I do think there'll be some close games, but I ultimately think the Sun will win. And I guess for anybody listening who's not aware of WNBA playoff format, these first round series are only 3 games. So not really a lot of opportunity to come back.
Yeah,
you kind of have to like,
tough.
You basically get 2 games, right? Like you only get to lose 1 game. And so you have to be really careful. And I'm not really sure if, I actually didn't really look up the record between the Sun and the Fever, but it feels anecdotally like the Sun have whipped the Fever's ass every time they've played them. And I think that's mostly just from the early season kind of games. I think that the Fever played much better later in the season. At least I'm just talking out of my ass right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. The Fever just played better in general in the second half of the season, so I'm sure they played the Sun better. But yeah, I think the Sun should probably take this series.
You think they blow it up if they don't make a deep like finals run this year, like the Sun?
No, I don't know how they would blow it up any more than they kind of have the last couple of years. Like getting rid of Jonquel a couple of years ago was like kind of the big blow up move. Because I don't think AT and Diana are going to go anywhere. I'm pretty sure they're locked up there. I don't really know the contract situations. I don't know what they could blow up, to be honest, because they changed the roster this year, even with, getting, like making Taisha Harris kind of like the main point guard. They got rid of Heidemann. They made some pretty big roster changes, so I don't really know what they could do. I don't know, maybe. Who knows? They might try and swing a big trade or do something else, but I don't really know what they could do. I do think there's like a concerning lack of young talent on the Sun. So like going forward, that's kind of going to be interesting. But it's also the WNBA, so it's a bit easier to like remake your roster in an off season. As we saw from the Seattle Storm, which I guess is our last series to cover.
Dramatically changed team.
Yeah, so I guess we're on to our final series here.
The best series of the first round, the Aces against the Storm.
I low-key was thinking this might be like a finals, and now it's a first-round series.
I did not realize until just now when I pulled up the stats page on Yahoo that it's Michelob Ultra Arena.
Yeah.
Sorry. I know they're never going to sponsor us anyway. That's not a good beer, man. That shit is not.
Nope.
Not it.
Nope. I mean, I would take their money if they offered it to us.
Yeah, I would drink a few. You know what I mean? If they paid me to do it.
I mean, hell, I would even drink La Crema, official wine sponsor of the WNBA, if they offered us money. Not going to choose to drink it otherwise, but here we are. In fact, we're just going to.
You're nothing from me. I would do it.
I mean, I'll still drink their wine and take their money. Don't get me wrong, but instead, we're going to do free advertising for Erath wineries in Oregon today. Which, yeah, I don't know that I would choose this wine again. It's fine. I'm just like, it's not rocking my world like I hoped.
I like it, but I feel like there's other Pinots I could get that cost a little bit less, that are a little bit better.
Yep. I think I'd rather spend a little bit more on a better Oregon Pinot. I mean, I'm pretty addicted to Lingua Franca right now, so shout out Lingua Franca. Please sponsor us, send us money. Tristan Thompson, I think, was part of a collab with Lingua Franca, so there's even a basketball connection. So like, help us.
There's even a Canada connection. Wow, crazy.
Yeah, I know. Was it Tristan Thompson or
the official wine of illegitimate children, or whatever it is that he's up to these days?
Jesus Christ. I think it was Tristan Thompson, but as an NBA player, anyways, did a collab with Lingua Franca, which that one's not available in Canada, unfortunately. But I get to sell their regular wine, and it slaps. They were actually even recently at the White House. One of their wines got served for the Japanese presidential visit to the White House. So there's lots of...
That's not the one who got assassinated, right? Or...
Are they?
This is more recent? This is not the one who got...
No. This was like in the last 6 months.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
No. This was like back in May, I think. Or so, give or take, because I was at a wine event and it happened right before that. And we were showing that wine. So that was a fun fact we got to pull out for everybody. Anyway, circling back, since we're in the Pacific Northwest, lots of good wine from Washington, and also a good basketball team who completely remade themselves. So look at that fucking segue. I nailed that.
A busy off season. Oh my goodness.
Oh, did they ever? And actually, my favorite thing is that, speaking of wine, when they were recording Nneka Agwumike, she posted some story or something with this package of stuff she'd gotten from the Seattle Storm, and one of them was actually some wine from Washington, and I think it was the whatchamacallit, what it's called. And I laughed because I was like, of all the Washington wine to give people, it's not the greatest, but it's not bad. It's just really funny because they have really funny labels, and so I laughed kind of hard at that. But even a wine connect, they were even courting their free agents with wine. So
Washington, very good winery, especially Walla Walla.
Oh, Walla Walla, Walla Walla Merlot.
Oh, we got to talk about real quickly. This is now basketball, but
well, we are a wine and basketball podcast.
As a New England Patriots fan, one of our former franchise quarterback before Tom Brady, Drew Bledsoe, has a winery up in Walla Walla, and it's called Doubleback. And I bought their wine one time in Honolulu, of all places. So the first time I ever saw it in person, because I'd seen it before. I got a 90+ in Wine Enthusiast or whatever. It was almost like a $90 bottle of Cabernet.
Okay. Yeah.
It was, this is back when I had disposable income. That shit was phenomenal. It was very good. That was awesome stuff. Shout out to Drew Bledsoe. Shout out to the mid-90s, late 90s New England Patriots.
Well, speaking of football, I just got an interesting fantasy trade offer while we spoke. Dontavian Wicks for Greg Dulcich. I don't really know if I want...
I think to take it off for Derek Carr. I was like, take it.
No. I'm good. Anyway.
Saving the city. You gotta take it.
He's literally the quarterback of the team I cheer for, and I don't even want him. But anyway, no, Washington has some great wine. Shout out to my homie Elliot, who will eventually come on the pod. Another unofficial wine consultant of Wine and Dime podcast. We were staying at his cabin out in Invermere in BC, and his wine cellars out there, and he hooked us up with this Merlot from Leonetti Cellars, and he bought them for like $40 a bottle, and now they're worth like $150 a bottle. So yeah, that shit is good though. That Merlot was like one of the nicest Merlots I've ever had in my life. Like I would probably sell my soul for more. It was really good. I don't have.
I see Washington's doing this thing out there, man. I actually like that state. I considered moving out there for school, but turns out applying is very expensive these days, more so than when I was a young lad. So Washington did not happen.
Pretty wild how much application costs are. I spent about $500 applying for grad schools. Like, it's fucked up, and that shit is non-refundable. Like,
yeah, it cost me $180 to apply to U of T. $180 to apply to Warren School.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I got there, I hated it. Shout out to U of T.
That's okay. University of Calgary took my money and then rejected me twice. So my hometown university sent me a physical They sent me an email, and then they sent me a physical copy just to make sure that I got the fucking message.
Wait, do they not do like preferential enrollment for like locals in Canada? Like in the States, like if you're in California, like University of California System's mission is to serve Californians, right? So you have a little bit of an edge if you're from California, especially if you went to a junior college there or like a community college, right? Is that not a thing in Canada?
No, the only place
preference.
The only place that probably makes a difference, or only maybe time that makes a difference, is first of all, if you are applying for like your undergrad and you're coming out of high school, like you have a better chance maybe because of like scholarships. Like it's not even the universities themselves, because like I went to school at a province my entire education. It's more like you have a better chance at scholarships if you're applying locally or like whatever. Just because some of them are predicated on going to an Alberta university or like that provincial university, for instance. But I never had an issue getting admission to another university. And no, they don't really give a preference. The only other place that actually does that in Canada would be Quebec, because they have extra subsidized tuition for Quebec students. So like I've heard of a few people, I know a few people who moved to Quebec and lived there for a year to become residents, and then they applied because then they get access to cheaper school. But no, there's no real like incentives. And especially with grad school too, they usually only accept the number of students that they have funding for, depending on your program. And the Alberta universities, when I applied, had just taken a huge funding cut from the government. So they were like, had even less money to share. And like U of A, even University of Alberta in Edmonton, I almost moved to Edmonton. They even actually put their broke boy status in my rejection letter. Yeah, I applied there. I'm happy.
Berkeley did that to me. They said, "Oh, we just didn't get the funding to admit as many students as we wanted." I was like, "Oh, you could have just told me I didn't get in. That would have been
right.
That would have been easier. I would rather not think that I might have got in. Like you could have just told me.
Just tell me no.
That like tell me I'm not good enough. That would make me happier if that makes any sense.
No, it does. I mean, and
because it's an elite school. Like if it was a shitty school and they were like, "Hey, we have excuses," I'd be like, "Come on, shut the fuck up." But if they're a great school and they said I didn't get in, I'd be like,
"Tell me I suck."
Yeah, I'm an okay student. Like whatever.
Fine. Yeah. Well, that's okay. Again, my hometown school rejected me twice, so that was cool. I also had to have my application into them like the first. They were like, their grad school applications are due like before, like really early in the year, and so I had to like scramble to get that shit in, and then they rejected me, and then they sent me a physical copy to make sure I got the message, and I was like, wow. So special shout out, special fuck you to the University. Special shout out to the University of Calgary. Fuck you.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
Oh well, whatever.
Where'd you go again?
I went to the University of Saskatchewan for my master's.
Yeah, shout out to Saskatchewan. I met one of the several people who live out there, and she told me it's not as bad as they.
To be honest, I actually loved it. It was a pretty sick place. Saskatoon, very underrated city in Canada, especially food wise. They have really good restaurants there. There's like 2 or 3 chefs who were on like Top Chef Canada, stuff like that, and they moved home and like started restaurants. And there's a really good food scene there. Saskatchewan people are also just like nice. It's kind of like that, like, you know how like Minnesota and like the Midwest are like famous for that, just like hospitality and like just really friendly people. Saskatchewan's very much like Saskatchewan's very much like that, and I think it's a similar vibe where it's just like cold as fuck, and so you kind of need each other to like not die. So yeah, you're usually pretty. I don't know. People were nice. I liked it there. So shout out USask. And we're on a really wild tangent from the Aces and Storm series.
I'm not tangent. I'm sorry.
Me too. This is what people come for, really.
But we did talk about the Pacific Northwest a little bit. And
we did, yes. Delicious wine. Delicious wines come from there. And also Good basketball teams. Yeah.
Also,
Shout out Walla Walla.
Seattle Storm. Shout out to Seattle also. The last vacation I took before I enlisted and wound up being government property for 6 years.
Yeah. I've actually never been to Seattle. I've been through the airport once, but I've never actually been to Seattle. I would very much like to go. We're planning a little Pacific Northwest road trip in the next year or two. We might wait till Portland's up, and so we can hit a bunch of WNBA cities. But our American travel is my partner and our American travel is mostly predicated on going to WNBA games now.
Yeah.
So if you want us to come to your city, get a WNBA team is pretty much what I.
Yeah. Seattle is like if Portland had Black people.
Okay.
So the tech industry, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like two sides pulling on the same string in different directions. Like the tech thing is weird because it's made it wild expensive to be out there. But it feels a little bit more home than Portland does. Even though I like Portland, don't get me wrong, but Seattle feels a little more comfortable for me than Portland did.
Yeah, a little less racist. Yeah. Also, like less hipstery.
Yeah, I feel like you can be. There's like more regular people in Seattle than there are.
Yeah.
Like Seattle's like Portland's cool, but like sometimes it's so quirky that it's almost a parody of itself, and I'm like, you can't you had to have done that as a bit. Like they can't be.
Portlandia was like the perfect show. It like nailed it all on the head. I had that experience too in Portland when I was there. I was like, I like it, but I'm also not really sure how I feel about it at the same time. A lot of hipsters. Seattle feels like Vancouver, but with culture. Vancouver does not have culture. I don't think personally. I think Vancouver is mostly its culture is rich white people who pretend to have culture. Now, that being said, there is a lot of there's a very vibrant Asian community and stuff. And so there's lots of really good culture that way. But just as a city, it doesn't have that kind of it just kind of feels I don't know, weird. So Seattle seems pretty cool. And, Skylar Diggins-Smith did list the ownership of the Seattle Storm as a big reason she wanted to go. And so they seem pretty cool too, just like the city they live in. Again, we're just killing these segues, just really nailing it. And I should probably get to that.
I just wish that Seattle had good enough jerseys to match the quality of the franchise. I feel like the jerseys are kind of ugly.
The yellow and green
you can make work, but they're not doing it. It's pea green.
Mm-hmm.
And Crayola yellow. I feel like there's a way to make it work better.
It needs to be a forest green and gold situation, less of a nasty green and yellow situation.
Yeah, maybe even a marigold or something. I
get where they
think men could only see 8 colors. I see at least 20.
I understand that they're going for emerald green because it's the Emerald City. So I get that. But they needed, if you're going to go with emerald green, you need a different color yellow for sure. So yes, I agree. The jersey. And then I hate that they sort of started doing that lime green thing that the Seahawks were doing. Not a vibe. Also not a vibe.
The neon shit is disgusting. Mm-mm. I feel forest green actually works. Even though emerald is the Emerald City, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The forest green works because there's a literal rainforest out there. That's actually what it is. People think it's only tropical ones that are rainforests, but there's temperate rainforests too, like the one in Seattle. And so I feel forest green also works.
Yeah.
Hella evergreen trees out there. Hella evergreen trees.
Tons of them. I don't know. It would have been a better choice color-wise, but...
Evergreen State is the state nickname. Come on now.
Yeah, but on the court, they got some good style. Nika Mule finally scored, so that's cool.
I thought you were going to call a player evergreen. I was like, oh, time not segue.
Nah, not that good. I'm in my Segway bag today, but not that deep in the bag.
The way Canadians say bag, it always throws me off.
Yeah. I feel like we in the West also have the most neutral Canadian accent, so there's that.
One thing interesting going into this matchup is, so the teams combined have won 9 of the last 10 games.
Yeah.
The only loss was the Storm losing to the Aces. Check that out. By 13 points.
All right, so I guess we should start with the Storm then. Let's cover that side of things, and then we'll get to the defending champions and my favorite human on the planet, A'ja Wilson. Oh my God, these sirens again. Shut up. Anyway, stop. I don't know. Anyways, be quiet. Anyway, the Storm, I think they got off to a rocky start. People were kind of unsure. I think it took a little time to get the Skylar Diggins-Smith, Nneka Agwumake situation going, especially because they already have a very ball-dominant scorer in Jewell Loyd, obviously. But I mean, I always love when college teammates get to play together again, and so I love the Jewell and Skylar reunion. I think the Storm are just like a cool franchise in general, and it's really fun to see them back on top. I like that they weren't down for too long, because they've got the resources that they're willing to spend, to get good players. Like they're patient with some of their developmental projects, obviously, like players like Ezzy, like they took time on her, and it's paying off. And even obviously Jewell Loyd, she's a homegrown talent, but they also have that. They've seemed to have like found that perfect balance between like developing your own players and then being able to chase big free agents as well. And I love that. I think it's really cool. But yeah, they're really good. They're really fun to watch. It's been fun seeing Nneka and Skylar hit their strides. And I'm excited to see what they can do in the playoffs. I think that Skylar is coming in motivated as hell. And they're
always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, always for sure. But I think that I'm excited to see her in the playoffs again, honestly. More than anything else. I'm really pumped to see her in the playoffs again because I think she is an incredible point guard and player, and her and Jewell are going to cook. And it's honestly, it's been so refreshing to see Seattle have more of a real offense this year, because as much fun as it was to see Jewell kind of like just cook last year, I also yelled at my TV a lot about how few screens were being set for her, because Ezzy is incapable of setting a good screen. That's like my only thing I don't love about Ezzy Megbagor is she cannot set a goddamn screen to save her life. Yeah. So that was frustrating. So it's been really fun to see a semblance of a real offense. And I think their defense is quite solid too. They've got pretty solid talent on the wings. I think that, is Sammy Whitcomb starting right now? I can't remember. I'm woefully unprepared. I'm a great podcast host. Super good at this. I'm more dialed in on the wine than I am the Seattle Storm.
I haven't caught a Storm games since the last time they smacked the shit out of the Mercury. But I think one thing I'm looking for, I'm really interested in this matchup is, so obviously the Storm are underdogs here, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I think is really interesting is you have the team that forces the most steals in the entire league in the Storm, versus the team that turns it over the least in the Aces. Yeah. Classic unstoppable force versus immovable object matchup. Sorry, I could not pronounce immovable there for a second. But I blame the state of Oregon for this one. But
it's their fault.
I think it's gonna be really interesting. The Storm also blocked the most shots in the league, so I don't have like the defensive efficiency stats like pulled up or anything like that. But like you're talking about big defensive plays, steals and blocks. Number one in both.
Yeah, the Storm are real good on defense, and they play hard. Like that's the thing, is that they always have effort, and that's definitely, you can tell it's the Skylar Diggins-Smith team because they play with a lot of effort. And Noelle Quinn's done a really good job of deploying her players. I'm a little bit concerned about the benches of both teams. I think this is going to be like a really top heavy matchup. I don't think there's going to be a lot of bench players that make it in the game. Like Seattle has a decent rotation of bench players that they can throw out there, like Sammy Whitcomb, obviously. Oh my God, Mercedes Russell has been quite good. They've got some players, but the Aces' depth concerns me deeply.
Yeah,
pun intended.
I think it's a really fun matchup. We got two teams that are only 2 games apart in record. It's not like some of the other series where, like, Lynx and Mercury, you have an 11-game difference in the standings. Dream, Liberty, you have an 18-game difference. This is a little bit different. You got 2 teams that had fairly similar seasons in terms of, like, the overall output.
Yeah.
I think the thing that might end up... I think the Storm can easily steal a game in this one. I think the thing that'll tip this in the favor of the Aces, though, is you have a good 3-point shooting team against the worst 3-point shooting team in the WNBA, in the Storm.
Which is wild to think they're the worst
3-point percentage in the entire league.
Kind of wild, actually, because they don't have bad shooters necessarily.
Yeah, and some of it is, I mean, you talk about the 39-game regular season, a really weird number of games, by the way, but it kind of a small sample size in the broad scheme of things, but a big enough one that I feel like you can kind of determine the quality of the team shooting. And yeah, dead last in the league, I think it hurts you because having a poor 3-point shooting lineup, or at least performance or whatever, it means that it's harder for you to erase deficits quickly.
Yeah.
It's harder for you to build big leads.
The math
because
works
we know
against
how much,
you.
right, the 3-point, like good 3-point shooting can flip a game very, very quickly. Like, that's a big part of the reason like the Warriors were so famous for those third quarters. They would just get hot and a 20-point deficit would melt in like 3 minutes because one dude would get it going. And I don't know that the Storm necessarily have that quality. But the best 3-point shooter by percentage has been Nneka Ogwumike, which is interesting.
Yeah, especially because they have a sharpshooter like Whitcomb, for instance. And
under 30% for the season.
Yeah, she's had a bad year.
She shoots a lot of them, though. But
she's had a bad year from three. No, she's had a bad year from three.
Much better last year. 38% last year. Almost 39.
This year is definitely an outlier because I think her career average is probably closer to that 38, 39 range.
Yeah.
It's been rough. I always also forget that Gabby Williams is back now. I think that's a huge thing because they have another body they can kind of throw at Asia. I think this Storm are a bigger team. Only because I think the Aces, their bigs can kind of get played off the floor a little bit. Like you can play Kia, because Kia Stokes hasn't been great on offense this year at all.
Yeah.
And I think you can kind of, even Megan Gustafson's been better, but you can kind of, she's not like an elite player, so you can kind of play her off the court a little bit too. I do think that this Storm, I like the Storm's depth better. Jordan Horton's been pretty good this year in her second season. She's been coming on really nicely. Joyner Holmes, I don't know how much she's played too much, but Mercedes Russell's a really good player. She's had a good year. So it's been nice. They've got more bodies, I guess, they can kind of throw at the Aces. The Aces do not have much depth. Like outside of Kate Martin and like Sydney Olsen, whole lot of question marks. Whole lot of questions.
What happens. You have like 5 superstars,
Yeah. Well, and they haven't done a very good job of developing the talent that they have. Like they actually haven't done well in the draft. Like, and it's understandable when you're picking near the end of, you're picking at the end of every draft. But at the same time, like, I just think that the choices they've made on players haven't been great. Like, Kirsten Bell has not developed at all. Like, she's shown some flashes here and there, but like, this is her, 3rd or 4th year in the season in the league, and she really hasn't shown a lot other than just really good bench vibes, which is important, but not helpful in the ultimate goal of three-peating. I do think having Megan Gustafson's had a good year. I think she was a really good addition, kind of in that like Kayla George role. Big who can shoot. She'll have some. I think that Gustafson will have some big games in the playoffs. But
London Lions legend, by the way. Lions legend.
Yeah, but I do think it's going to be tough to have a bench that's not performing, and then even to have some of your starters that aren't playing particularly well. Like Chelsea Gray's taken a really long time to come on. Kelsey Plum's had a pretty up and down year. Obviously still a very good shooter, but she's had a pretty up and down year. You can kind of tell that, and even Jackie has had a bit of an up and down year. Just I think fatigue is an issue. You can kind of tell the burden of like trying to three-peat is kind of weighing on them, and it's been a tough year for that. Asia's had to do a lot too much. I think she's kind of had to. Honestly, the Aces low-key sometimes are just in terms of like not equivalent star talent, because the Aces are a much more talented team star-wise than like the Nuggets, for instance. But like Jokic covers a lot of problems, right? Like he can kind of paper over a lot of problems on that roster, and it's felt like Asia's had to do that this year. She's had to just have that like Iron Man role of like...
She's had to be incredible.
She's had to be amazing for them to pull out some of these games, and she is amazing, and she's done it. But it's concerning getting into the playoffs. And especially since the Storm have a lot of bodies to throw at her. Like they have Ezzy, they have Gabby, they have Nneka, they have Mercedes Russell. Like they've got good players that they can pack the paint and make her life more difficult. So I do think this game, like Asia's going to cook because it's Asia and she's going to be good. But the Storm are going to be a hard team to get past. And so they've played each other pretty equally, I think, for the most part this season. And so, yeah, like you said, kind of, it's unstoppable force versus immovable object. Oh my God. That's a hard word to say today. Thanks.
Well, one thing I think is really interesting is the Gabby Williams factor, right? Obviously, coming back to the W after the Olympics. I just spent a lot of time preparing for the Olympics. One thing I think is really interesting is like just going through like her game logs. she's come on lately. Like coming back in, there's a little bit of like a slow adjustment, somewhat limited minutes, not like low minutes, but like somewhat limited minutes.
Probably just easing her back in.
Whatever. Yeah. Right. But the last, the past 6 games, 17 points, 10 points, 12, 22, 14, 10. And over that stretch, well over 50% from the field.
Yeah, she's playing well.
She's come on lately. And so I feel like that could swing that team's performance beyond what it's been like in the aggregate over the whole season, right? Like she could kind of be the X factor for this team.
I think Spooky G is I love her. I love her so much. I think she's a huge player for them because she just adds a level of like movement, like her cutting and athleticism, because they're they're not a super athletic team, like necessarily, and her athleticism really stands out when you watch them.
She's quick.
She's quick. So yeah, and again, just that she's a really good size to be able to kind of guard someone like A'ja. She's not like the greatest defender, but she's good enough to like stay with her and just at least be a body that you can put on her for a few minutes. I think that Nneka's probably going to get the bulk of the defensive assignment against A'ja. I'm curious do you think Nika Camille is going to get any run in this playoff series? She didn't really play in the season.
I don't think so.
So I doubt it, but I feel like she could be a fun option just for like, if they're in a tough game and they just need something, I could see her being thrown at like Kelsey or somebody because she can obviously stick with like an electric guard like that. She's a really good defender. I don't think she'll make it in the game probably, but at least it's nice to have that luxury of like a rookie that is going to be able to like go play hard and defend, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to be really interested to see how each team kind of deploys their lineups, but it's going to be probably my favorite series to watch. I mean, it's the most closely matched, like you said, just games apart.
It's upset potential for sure.
Yeah. It's kind of the weirdest one in terms of how good they are, though. It's like, I don't know. They seem like the most even, and it's kind of disappointing that it's like a first round series.
What do you think is the over-under on the number of times they'll mention that Gabby Williams is from Nevada, which I just found out mere months ago?
I don't even know because I didn't know that either.
Sparks, Nevada, a town I'd never even heard of. That's where she went to high school and everything. Like, she's been there. She's a real Nevada person. I don't know what Nevada people are called. Nevadians? I don't know.
No idea.
But yeah, that would have been her local team had she not been, a professional hooper of her own.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't even know if it'll come up, to be honest with you. I don't think it's ever come up on a broadcast with her playing the Aces, so I'm not sure that it will now, but you never know.
The town was named for Thomas Sparks, a former member of the Silver Party, which is a political party that did not make traction nationally, it turns out. Fun fact of the day.
Wow. All right. Cool.
Yeah. Stuff every day. Fifth most popular city in Nevada.
Yeah. Huh. All right. I do think an X factor though for the Aces is probably going to be a player like Kate Martin, to be honest. I mean, obviously Jack, I don't know. The vibes around the Aces are just not immaculate. And I'm worried about them. Like I don't have any concern about A'ja because Asia's amazing. And on paper, they're all very good, but they've all had up and down seasons. I hope Chelsea stays healthy. That's going to be the most key to the Aces playoff run and this series. But yeah, the whole lawsuit hanging over them, that situation, I don't think is ever really. I think that's having more of an effect on the team than anyone would like to admit. The vibes just have not been great, and I'm pretty curious to see how that goes. But it's definitely going to be the best series. Watch us be wrong and somehow the Dream like make a run against the Liberty or something, but I do think this is going to be the best series.
Do you think it's locked in? The Aces are going to take it, or do you think that Seattle's got a shot at it? Because I think low key, we could be looking at a real series. I think it's going to come down to the last game. I
think it's going to go 3 games. Actually, I think more than any other series. I do too. I think more than any other series, it's going to go 3 games. Because even though like the Fever and the Sun didn't finish that far apart in standings either, but like that series just feels like such a big disparity just in like because the Fever are so young and like unproven. Whereas this series has a bunch of players who've been in the playoffs before, and like especially with the Aces, players who've won before. And Nneka's won a championship. I think Sammy Whitcomb technically has with the Storm. Mercedes Russell, I think, was on. I think Ezzy and Sammy Whitcomb. Like, I think the Storm have enough players who've at least been in the playoffs now, too. So they don't have as many like X factors in terms of just like unproven players. And then you've got a player in Skylar and who's going to be like, you know, and obviously Jules won championships. So you've got a player in Skylar who's like motivated as hell to win one. So yeah. I think this series more than anything else, even though like not only are they closely matched in the standings, but also just in terms of there being two really veteran teams. Yeah. So I don't really have too much else to say on that other than I really can't wait for it to start. I wish that the playoffs weren't happening at the same time as NFL football because I like to watch both. But here we go, and I'm probably going to choose the W over the NFL for this week at least.
Hey, shout out to the Saints, though, for Derek Carr saving the city, man.
No, Clint Kubiak. It's Clint Kubiak. Let's be real. It's not Derek Carr.
Hey, Carr will get it done when everything around him is like set up well.
Yeah,
he'll do the things.
Which means
if you can scheme guys open, you'll hit them. If you can protect him, he'll make the plays. If he's not gonna fix shit,
no,
he'll do the things. If you set it up, he's not gonna fix it.
Which is the Clint Kubiak of it all. Really, he's the one who's creating this ecosystem for him to thrive. So, yeah, go Saints. Who dat?
Who dat indeed? Shout out to New Orleans, man. I fucking love that city.
I really want to go so badly. It's like my top 3 city I'd like to go to.
New Orleans. I have one quick Saints story. If you want to know how much New Orleans people hate the Atlanta Falcons.
It's a beautiful hatred.
I was in New Orleans and I was in the French Quarter and I saw a house where on their balcony was hanging the 28-3 from the Falcons Patriots Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And for a second I was like, a Patriots fan out here? And then I realized, no, it's just somebody who fucking hates the Falcons that much.
Yeah. Pretty much. Anybody but Atlanta.
I love it.
It's one of those like divisions where I feel like we truly hate our divisional rivals like more than anybody else. It just feels so deep, like that hatred for Atlanta in particular, but then even like Tampa Bay and Carolina. Like my favorite was one of Sean Payton's last years when we swept Carolina and he's in the locker room dancing with a broom. Like, yeah, that's the kind of energy I want. So
it's funny because that's also a division that teams have won like with 7-9 records and shit.
Yeah, we really fucking hate each other, but we're also not good. It's a lot like the NFC East, actually. Yeah, a lot of hatred, not a lot of winning. But as long as you beat your divisional rivals, that's what matters. Because like Giants fans don't care how bad they are, but if they can beat the Cowboys,
it's very college football league. The NFC South, you know what I mean? It's like whatever the national conversation is, it doesn't matter. We hate those guys across the way. And if we beat them, we're good.
Fuck those guys, basically, is the energy that we're bringing.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on the WNBA playoffs before we, or the W in general, or the state of the league?
If Diana retires, I'll be doing like a 20-minute soliloquy on Diana Taurasi.
Well, we already have our wine. We already have our wine picked for that situation. It feels weird that the wine's actually not an Italian wine. We should probably revisit that. Anyway,
we could pick an Argentinian one because you got something from Argentina too. That's Italian via Argentina, if I recall correctly.
True enough. Yeah, she's Argentinian and Italian, so that could work. But yeah, I guess
There's some interesting family members in the a couple of generations.
A lot of passion in that family. A lot of passion. A lot of hot-blooded people. A lot of hot-blooded people.
Getting technical fouls, man. I'm telling you. But
my favorite was actually the number of players who got technical fouls in honor of Diana Taurasi in the last day of the season. Like Katie Lou Samuelson
is a serious form of battery, right?
Katie Lou Samuelson took a tech, and then her sister took the technical shot for Washington. So it was a family affair.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Just absolutely beautiful, like chef's kiss.
It's such a good league. It's such a great league. I can't wait till it comes to fucking Toronto. I can't wait.
I know. I'm pumped too. I actually just won a Porter Airlines gift card, and I'm low-key gonna think about saving it until the W is in Toronto, so I can use it.
Whoa. Honestly, so I think this is what I want to like close it out with. Is like 2026 when the W comes to Portland and Toronto. Like I'm going to, so I've covered women's sports in Toronto. I've covered the PWHL. I've asked awkward press questions to a lot of players, including some Olympic gold medalists. I will be pushing real hard to try to cover the W team that comes out to Toronto. And let me tell you, if that works out, I could be seeing some stuff on the podcast. I fucking hope so.
I hope so too. It's a dream. Unfortunately, I don't live really that close to any WNBA cities, so here I am.
I just need a team name. I need it to come out more than a year after the team is already launched. We can't do the PWHL thing where they reveal the team name after a whole season has been played. I need that shit like now. I need it bad.
I thought the branding situation of the PWHL was very interesting. In a way, I almost wish they would have just kept the city name rather than having a team name, because I don't know. Anyway,
the British soccer thing where it's like Toronto Hockey Club.
Yeah, I don't know. In a way, I almost like prefer that. If you don't have like monikers from the start. Shout out
to the Scepters.
Shout out to the Ottawa team whose logo is literally just like the Cleveland Cavaliers and Calgary Flames had a baby.
It's gross. Those should never have had a baby. That's gross.
Yeah, it's awful.
I like the New York Sirens, but they distance themselves from the actual mythological figure from Greek lore of the women who like lure sailors into their death. Yeah, that would be so cool.
Badass. That's how I feel about the Valkyries though with the Golden State team. Is I feel like they based it on the Marvel character Valkyrie more than actual Valkyries. Could have been badass.
It could have been kind of leading people to the world of the dead, but instead they were like general girl boss, and I was like, we could have done way more. Yeah,
and you can also tell that the brand house who did their logo was the same one that did Angel City FC, and it's good, but it's also like
pretty good though.
It's cool, but it's also like too much the same. You can I don't know. I don't like when you can really tell that like the same agency did it, and you're like, could be cooler.
Angel City, their inaugural season, they had some fire jerseys though. Shout out.
They had cool shit. CFC. They had cool.
The team has not been very good, but
yeah,
the stadium's phenomenal. The fan atmosphere is phenomenal. The branding is phenomenal. I just wish we could win some damn game. I'm sorry, I'm an ACFC fan.
I'm just like low-key sad though too that like Golden State got purple when I think like it'd be so fun. It'd be so fun for WNBA Toronto to use like the Raptors purple, even if they have no connection to the Raptors, but just having that purple would have been.
They still could,
but it is a different purple. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I really hope we get a team name soon, and I hope it's not stupid. But we'll see.
Yeah, I feel bad as a Californian that my only California team is ACFC, and they're not. They've yet to make the playoffs.
Doesn't San Diego have a team now?
Yeah, but I don't acknowledge San Diego. Like, let's be honest.
Oh, fair enough.
Nobody cares about San Diego teams except for people who live in San Diego.
My NWSL team is Racing Louisville, and they have sick kits also because I really enjoy the mint green and that lavender.
Shout out to Louisville, man. Shout out to Louisville. I think they played a college football game today. I hope they do well.
I don't know, but they had some cool turkey legs. I saw that on Twitter.
There you go.
Yeah. So, anyways, with that,
we're gonna miss our first game, but I'm ready. I'm ready for the postseason.
I really don't want college football, but we may as well wrap up here. And longer episode today, so apologies. I don't know. Anyways, we'll see y'all next time.